Welcome back to the North Star Takes podcast. I'm Bailey Paulicki. He's Jacob Liberta, and we're a Minnesota sports podcast. So if you're a Minnesota sports fan, especially a Minnesota Wild fan, please click that like button and feel free to subscribe to our channel as well. And today we're going to be previewing the Minnesota Wild, obviously recording this pretty much right before the first game of the season. And it's finally here. Preseason's over with. Seemed like kind of a long preseason. I know that's how every preseason feels, it seems like. The Wild had a pretty impressive showing in the preseason. They only lost one game, albeit most of it was split squad action. And never really had the full team involved until the last couple games. But I don't know. What are your expectations for the season, Liberta? I saw the line for points is roughly at around 100 or 101.5, somewhere in that range, depending on what book you're looking at. So obviously people still expect this Wild team to be pretty good in this Western Conference and competing for playoff spots. What are your thoughts on the expectations for the Wild, especially compared to the great season they had last year?
That sounds about right. And you know how it goes. Vegas knows. I think
True.
that they always set pretty good lines where they'll probably hover right around there. I know there's always a few breakout teams or maybe a few teams that disappoint, but the majority of teams always end up around that line, whatever it is, whether it be hockey or whatever, football. I mean, it doesn't matter. I feel like they always set a good line for how teams are going to fare in the standings. They miss on a few, but they get a majority right. So I'm inclined to say, too, that it kind of feels like the general perception of this team is probably about a 100-point team. I think even in franchise history, how many times have we had 100 points in the regular season? Have been three? I can't remember.
Yeah, that sounds right. Maybe, twice or three times. It can't be more than three, I don't think.
Yeah, because we obliterated last year. And I remember there was that big year, I think it was 2016.
Yes, that sounds right.
Yeah, and then I think it ended in 2016-17 season where we were awesome too. But, I think that was probably, different for playoff success. But, I think that was the best regular season we put together in that that Suter Parisi era, excuse me.
Pominville is a part of it too.
He's part of the squad of Pominville. Yeah, but anyways, yes. Basically, what I'm trying to say is we haven't even had that many 100-point seasons in our franchise's history going back to 2000. So it's really, I think that's a pretty high bar to set before the season even starts. I think that those are some lofty expectations, especially considering what we've lost. Really, I mean, mainly Kevin Fiala. I think that's a pretty big offensive piece to take out of the equation. But I do feel pretty good about this team's ability probably to still scrap and still win quite a few games. I think that we have an MVP candidate on our team yet again here with Kaprizov. I think he's just still coming into his own. I think that he's definitely made a name for himself now league-wide, and I saw some pundits out there picking him to win the MVP. So, if he's going to do that, I think the Wild are going to have a great season.
For sure.
Least regular season-wise anyway. Again, playoffs, different story. But I would say 100 points sounds about right. And I think this division's always competitive, but I think we still find a way to get right around there. Maybe a little bit less, maybe a little bit more. Who knows? But I feel pretty good, obviously, barring injury, of course. So what do you think of that 100-point line?
Yeah, I'd say that's about accurate as well. I think, back when we lost Fiala and then eventually lost Talbot, I was kind of sitting there scratching my head thinking, I don't see how this team's really going to be, as good as last year. And I points wise, they won't be because it's really hard to match what they did last year.
Yeah.
But division wise, I think we still have the same teams to worry about. It's still going to be Colorado, who's the king of the division. St. Louis is scrappy and they always give us fits. They have most of their team back this year. And then Nashville as well. They're already off to a blazing 2-0 start. I know it's early, but we've had troubles with Nashville over the last several years as well. So I look at those three teams as our main issues again in this division. And, it's probably Colorado and St. Louis, I'd say, are probably top two again. And then, well, I guess we were second last year, but I have a feeling St. Louis could push into that second spot. And then it'll be us and Nashville kind of fighting for that third spot, either that or a wild card. So, I think 100 points is about right, though. And it's really just going to depend on how some of these guys implement into the lineup. Marco Rossi, had a fantastic preseason. There's a ton of hype surrounding him as he was a top, first-round draft pick for the Minnesota Wild. I believe number 9 overall. Matt Boldy in his second season, his first full season, playing without Kevin Fiala, but he's still with Gaudreau. And it sounds like initially they're going to have Sam Steele center that line, although I would imagine down the road he'll probably flip with Rossi, and Sam Steele end up on the fourth line with Dewar and Duhaime. And then you got that third line who's missing Greenway to start the season because he's rehabbing an off-season surgery. So It sounds like he's not going to be out super long, though, like maybe just the duration of October, maybe into early November. But then it's kind of interesting when he comes back because they have Jost on that Eriksson and Foligno line. So if Greenway comes back and he's automatically inserted into the lineup, where do you put Jost? Who does he bump out? They have some interesting decisions to make because Jost, I think, is better than a fourth line player. And if Greenway coming back bumps Jost down to the fourth line, then you're knocking out either Dewar or Duhaime, who both are obviously deserving of minutes as well. So clearly it's a good problem to have. We have a lot of depth on our forward positions. I think our center position is stronger this year just because we simply added Marco Rossi. Sam Steele is actually a decent center as well. And, you're keeping that first line intact with Hartman and Kaprizov, Zuccarello. Initially I was kind of hoping maybe Rossi could somehow make a push, but it was probably unrealistic to expect him to center the first line right away in his rookie season. Also, Hartman had a career best season last year. I can see them not wanting to mess with that line and just try and keep things intact. And preseason, that line looked pretty well synced up, once again. So I'm not terribly worried about it. And then defensive wise as well, we're adding, Kalen Addison's finally on the squad full time, which is great to see. He's going to be with the number one power play unit, which is super nice because, in terms of just an offensive player, I think he's a little more under control than Matt Dumba. And I think he can be a different kind of weapon for this power play. You still got Goligoski, but really, Goligoski's probably the weak link of our defense, but he's going to be playing with Spurgeon, it looks like, at least initially to start. So, defensive-wise, I'm feeling a little better just by simply inserting Kalen Addison and getting rid of a guy like Dmitry Kulikov. And John Merrill, he's also injured, so he'll, insert himself at some point here. And I could certainly see him kind of pushing in Goligoski's spot if Goligoski struggles to start the season here. And then lastly, the goaltending. I think, Marc-Andre Fleury, he's 37, 38 years old now. And then we also have Philip Gustafson, who we got in the Cam Talbot trade from Ottawa. And, maybe this is a situation where Gustafson can kind of prove himself. I'm sure long-term there's no plans for him to be the number one goalie when you got Jesper Wallstedt ready to go down in Iowa. It's probably only a matter of time before he's up here, probably another year or so. So I'm just interested to see, what the goalie split is. Can Fleury play, anywhere from 55 to 60 games? Do they need him to play a little less? It certainly won't be the 50-50 split that it was with Talbot. So probably the biggest question mark is Gustafson. And then, just kind of how some of these defensive pairings shape out. But honestly, we did lose Fiala. That was a crushing blow. Losing a good, solid goaltender was also kind of crushing. But at the same time, I don't feel like we're that much worse than we were last year. And who knows, maybe there's a little bit of regression to happen in the Western Conference as well.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think there was a lot of good teams in the West last year, at least at the top. I feel like we were really battling the Blues for that second spot in the Central Division all the way up to the end of the season last year, and we had 113 points. So it's like that felt a little drastic. Feels like that probably doesn't happen most years. And then you got obviously the Cup champs, Colorado. They ran away with the division last year for. They had it basically locked up for probably the last couple months of the season, and they just dominant. So it's like really, hopefully that all comes back down to earth a little bit. I know that's probably tough to expect, especially out of a team like Colorado, because they're probably just they're super good now. But the thing is, they have also one of the most promising futures as far as young talent. Cal McCarr kind of starts there. I think, in my opinion, I think he's the one of the best players in this league, and he's got so many years in front of him. So I kind of things like that. So I would say the Avalanche, I think they're going to be a really good team. Like I said, we're competing with the Blues, and I think, for instance, Nashville, I think they'll be scrappy. I know we had our troubles with them last year too, but kind of breaking it down to what we can do as far as probably our strengths go, or actually, I'd say points of emphasis. Let's start with the points of emphasis. I think I'm really curious to see what we look like as far as the special teams units go. I know that was a big hindrance to this team last year, where if we were good at good on the power play and on the penalty kill, I think that could improve things even more so than how good we already were. And I think that really kind of killed us in the playoffs. Truth be told, really, I think that room for improvement there. So I'm hoping in the offseason put in that work to make it look better, and just, if nothing else, at least league average. Last year we were, I think, barely top 20 in power play percentage, and we're 25th in the penalty kill. So that can't be a thing again. So hoping for better there. And I think adding on to, I know you're breaking down the roster, did a phenomenal job of that, and kind of going back to the last position that you brought up, and that was the goaltenders. I think you really got to walk a fine line with Fleury this year. I think, you got to have him playing enough games where you're giving yourself a good competitive chance every night as far as putting your best foot forward. But at the same time, you don't want to run them out there too much to the point where you're risking him being really fatigued or getting hurt. Like I
Right.
think that's a huge problem because like if he goes down, misses significant time, like I'm gonna be panicking because Gustafson is showing us nothing in the NHL to this point, a former second round pick, but still like he just doesn't play that much. So
Mhm.
you probably want to use him sparingly, but like you really gotta find what works as far as keeping Fleury fresh and on the ice enough, but like still not to the point where you're overusing him either because he's also up there in age. So
Right.
I think that's a really important thing to this team as well as just finding offensive chemistry. I think that was obviously the big strength for us last year. I think we were up there as far as goals scored. I can't remember where we ranked exactly. Were we tops or were we like it was a top five? I can't remember. We're somewhere
Yeah,
in the
I don't
top
remember
five.
exactly either, but we were up there for sure.
Yeah, when the dust settled, I can't remember exactly where we landed. I know for sure it was top five. So like we were just as dominant as anybody is scoring. So like I'm hoping that like Kaprizov gets off to a fast start because obviously last year took him a little bit to get going. He had quite a few assists early on, but I remember that was a big storyline was that he just wasn't putting the puck in the net.
Right.
So hopefully that changes this year. And then in contributions from some younger players like a Marco Rossi, I think he's definitely a Calder Trophy candidate. I think he could definitely win
Yes.
it, and I think he'll play a big role on this team sooner rather than later. So I'm pretty excited to see what he can bring because that was again the first draft pick that Bill Guerin made. So
Mhm.
kind of curious to see what that looks like as far as addressing this center problem that we've had for how long. So excited for what's to come there too.
Absolutely. And going back to your special teams point, I know it's preseason, it doesn't mean much. I think I saw they killed like 93% of the penalties this preseason.
That's crazy.
So the penalty kill is much improved. It's much more aggressive, going after the puck, making simple plays to get it out of the zone. So I think just simplifying it and being more aggressive hopefully should help. Power play wise, like I mentioned earlier, I'm just hoping the addition of a guy like Kalen Addison can at least help the puck move a little better. You already got Kaprizov, Zuccarello out there, and I think they still plan on Eck being with that first unit. So I mean, you got different skill sets out there. X in front of the net. Kaprizov and Zuccarello can both pass and score. I think Boldy's also with that first group. And then you got Rossi is with the second group, as well as like Hartman, Foligno might be as well. So it's it'll be interesting to see how the power play shakes out for sure. But penalty kill wise, I mean, I think it's tough to be worse than they were last year. So I'm hoping that's much improved. Um, any other final thoughts from you before we take off here, just on the season in general? Expectations for any certain players? I know you mentioned Rossi potentially winning the Calder and Kaprizov being a potential Hart finalist as well. Any other, last second thoughts from you?
Yeah, I'm just excited now that hockey season's here. I want to see how much regression there really is because we had a lot of guys that had career years last year. So I want to see if they build off that and like if they can maintain that level. Like we're gonna be super good again, I think. But it's
Mhm.
just like I have a hard time seeing that. Like for instance, with a Hartman, he felt like he played out of his mind for a while last year and set all these career marks. And I mean, I think he's a product of his line, quite frankly. I mean,
Right.
with Mats and Kaprizov. So it's like I think there's probably going to be some regression there, but at the same time, like if those guys are going, I don't see why Hartman wouldn't be. So I mean, you got to consider that. And then, like for instance, even a Foligno, I think he set a bunch of historic marks for or career marks for himself last year, and I mean they go up and down the list. Really, I think there's a lot of guys. So like if they can be some semblance of that, then I think we're going to be just fine. But it's just like that's probably what worries me the most is how much regression there is. It's just really hard to tell. And it's again, I'm not expecting 113 points out of this team because
Right.
that's a crazy mark. I mean, it was a franchise record, but I'm hoping if we end up at 100, a little bit more than that, I think I'd be pretty satisfied with that. Just given what we have and we're running it back really. So um, all in all, yeah, just excited because we got a good team again.
Yeah, and the main thing to remember too is like the Wild are still fielding a competitive squad while they're having
Yes,
serious salary cap issues.
good point.
Bill Guerin's been, stocking the cupboards in the minor league system. We've got plenty of young, especially like defensemen that will be coming up within the next several years. That'll be interesting to monitor as well. So, while it may be looking a little bleak right now, just in terms of like the moves we had to make, get rid of Fiala, getting Talbot out of here, although that was more self-inflicted on his part. Um, Guerin's, he's prepared to really make a run here when the salary cap space opens up here in a couple of years. So, as long as they're staying competitive and, they're giving Kaprizov a fighting chance on a competitive team and stuff like that. I mean, this team's going to be ready to roll here come a couple of years. So it's not like there's going to be some drop off where they're not, just not going to be competitive for a few years and then they'll come back. I think they're going to be competitive all the way up until they're truly ready to go all in on it. So that's something to think about too, just because I think Bill Guerin's done a phenomenal job. Obviously, he was dealt a difficult situation with those Parise and Suter contracts, but I think he did the right thing in buying them out, getting them out of the locker room, starting fresh with a new culture, all that stuff. Obviously, it worked out really well last year, the first year without Parise and Suter. So, but that will do it for this edition of the North Star Takes podcast. We'll be watching and seeing how the season goes, and obviously keeping tabs on it. We'll be doing more wild videos here now that the season's going as well. So please be sure to click the like button on this video and subscribe to our channel if you haven't done so already. Give us a follow on both Twitter and Instagram, and let us know your thoughts in the comment section below. What are your expectations for the Wild this season? Any specific player expectations you might have, and any other worries or concerns or positive things you have to say about this Wild squad. So until next time, thanks for watching.